Welcome, Shelley, and everyone who will be viewing this later. My name is Leann Harris, and I wanted to be able to offer this to coaches. Um, I've come to terms with the fact that I'm a behavior junkie and have been doing animal behavior for, I guess it was 13 years when I really stopped. I mostly did dog training, service dogs and therapy dog teams, and I really enjoyed it. But after I had my own business, Great Possibilities, and I ran that for about 6 years here in Richmond. And after about 6 years, I got really curious about the people. The dogs were really easy to train, the people not so much. So I wanted to go on a quest and find out all the behavior that I'd learned and all the studying I've done. How do I apply this to humans who have language? And that language part makes behavior kind of tricky. So I wanted to offer something to coaches to help them find a better tool to be able to communicate with their clients. You know, for me, behavior is everything. There is not a moment or a breath you take that you're not doing some form of behavior. And I'll explain the definition of behavior in the presentation. I just want to kind of explain where I'm coming from and just wanted to offer this. I can talk about behavior for hours on end. So if you have any questions, you can either interrupt or ask them later.
Perfect.
So let's get started. So in this one, we're going to learn how to use the science of behavior to explore client issues. And I know that sounds really geeky, but trust me, this is kind of the yin and yang part. If you're an energy worker or holistic health worker, and you are working on a more wordless level, and you are someone who helps to bring client issues up, what this behavior training does is really give you a tool for helping your clients to see it, name it, and let it go. If you're not doing a lot of energy work, this is still a very direct and precise tool that you can use with your clients to help them see why they get stuck and why they're performing the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again, and expecting different results. So we can also describe the common pitfalls that people make that keep them stuck, identify opportunities in client stories to use behavior strategies in order to help, and understand how to combine behavior and coaching principles to facilitate client change. So for those of you who are ICF trained, I do have some information in the end what core competencies you'll be using. So what is behavior and why should I care? So behavior, as defined by, I think this one is a dictionary, not Wikipedia, a manner of behaving or acting, which is a really bad definition because you're using the word to define the word. The one I like better is the aggregate of responses to internal and external stimuli. So if you are an applied behaviorist listening to this, you probably just gasped because I said internal stimuli. I actually follow a form of behaviorism called radical behaviorism, and that includes the thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Internal behavior that cannot be observed by another person directly. So normally we say behavior is something that can be looked at or observed, like on a movie, or if you're watching a play, you would see the actors walk around, like you would see the actor raise his hand with the big knife and stab another actor in the play. In radical behaviorism, you're also going to get that inner monologue coming out so you can hear his motivations and thoughts and beliefs as to why he's stabbing this person. So you get a little bit more explanation. The other part that radical behaviorism adds in is it suggests that there are frames and relations between thoughts. I know, slightly geeky. We won't get very geeky in this entire presentation. But if you like the sound of that, there is more. What it does is give clients a sense of relief that they are not crazy. Their thoughts are not just random. They are the sum of their entire learning experience up until this point. So the person becomes the focal point where environment and behavior interact. So it becomes very person-centric, not, because something in your past happens. And as coaches, we want to stay in the present and move forward. So how can we observe thoughts, feelings, and emotions since they too affect the way people behave? And Shelley, I won't put you on the spot, so I'll just give you the answer. As coaches, we ask them. So one of our superpowers as coaches is asking questions. And we don't need to interpret, diagnose, do anything else. As coaches, if we want to know the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that our clients are having, we just need to ask them. So I'm going to give you a little bit of basic terminology, and yes, I talk with my hands. Reinforcement, something that causes behavior to happen more frequently. This is determined by the person. Now pay attention because there's a pop quiz in just a minute. Punishment, something that causes behavior to happen less frequently. This is determined by the person. Positive in behaviorism does not mean good. It means added. Negative doesn't mean something is bad. It means something is taken away. Does that make sense? You're adding something to the environment to cause a behavior to happen more frequently in positive reinforcement. Or you could be adding something to the environment to cause behavior to happen less frequently, and that's positive punishment. And I'm going to show some examples, but this kind of becomes a grid in a little bit. All right, here's your pop quiz. You are on a diet, and I hand you that green smoothie. Is this a reinforcer or punisher?
A reinforcer.
Each person gets to decide. So for you, Shelley, it might be a reinforcer. That might be something that you enjoy, you feel healthy when you drink it. For me, it would probably be a punisher. Why do I have to be on this dumb diet and drink this disgusting drink? So what it does is allow for no judgment zone. What's reinforcing or punishing is determined by prior learning experience. In other words, it takes the moral judgments out of our coaching and allows for the client to just be able to freely express what's true for them. And our clients need us to be non-judgmental. So really quick history lesson, because some people will wonder where this all came from. So we have two halves. We have Ivan Pavlov. He was a Russian physiologist known for his work on classical conditioning. I'll explain what that is. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Physiology and awarded the Nobel laureate. He actually had no interest in behavior, dogs, or anything else. He was a physician, and he was studying the digestive system. Since even in the late 1800s, it was not socially acceptable to string up a bunch of humans and poke holes in their stomach and put sensors in there to study human digestion. He had a room full of dogs. In the picture here, there's just one, but there were a bunch. Going into his lab, in order for him to do the experiments, they couldn't have dogs salivating. So he's studying digestion. He's waiting, needing the dogs to salivate for him to study what happens. Because, you know, when we eat food, we make it wet and we swallow. If dogs are salivating in the middle of the night, you know, that's not going to help for the studies. So he needs to do it when he's in the room and when he's looking at the equipment. He's going to, what ended up happening with Pavlov is they would show meat powder to these dogs, and the dogs would start salivating, and then would make all the instruments go off. Well, there was a bell to the room. So when he walked in with the meat powder, all the dogs had to do was hear the bell, which predicted him coming in with the meat powder. And he got so frustrated because it kept making all the instruments go off before he was ready to take a recording. So he really stumbled upon classical conditioning. That was not what he was out to do.
That's funny.
B.F. Skinner. So he did kind of take Ivan Pavlov's idea and run with it. He's considered the father of behaviorism and started that in the 1930s. He focused more on reinforcement and to strengthen the behavior and created what's called the Skinner box. You can Google that if you want a little bit more detail. He also wrote Behavior of Organisms, and 21 other books, including Walden 2. Walden 2 is something I would definitely recommend if you listen to this and you like this. Read Walden 2 to see how the science of behavior affects us in our everyday lives. So what he did was took rats and studied the reinforcement, like we were talking about earlier, positive and negative reinforcement. We call this operant or respondent conditioning. It's a little bit more cognitive, and we have some examples down here. So, with both Pavlov and Skinner, when their theories are combined, it's combined into a unified learning theory. We kind of call it the learning theory applies to all entities that eat and have a spinal cord, and that's needed for the nervous system. So this does include babies, human babies, dogs, cats, goats, lions, chickens, whales, and even spouses. One of the most beloved moments when I was doing dog training is people would eventually ask, well, does this work on my spouse? And I assured them as long as they have a brainstem and your spouse eats, yes, they too can be trained. So the rat is always right. In coaching, we're going to have clients who do things that we do not understand, nor do they. And that's okay. There's a reason. That reason may never be known in the present, but at some point your client was reinforced and punished in such a way as to start this behavior. The important point for coaches, we don't have to know why or how the behavior started in order to help them learn a new habit. So sometimes we get stuck in client stories about why me, why did this happen, why did I do that? You know, we're beating ourselves up. Because you're dealing with an entity, us usually as a client, we don't have to understand the why to move forward. So a little bit more terminology. I call this the ABCs of behavior. Antecedent, very big word. So what the first thing that happened, or the trigger, you might call that with the client. The behavior, what we do and think about what happened, and the consequence, what happens after we do something about what we think happened. Example, my husband slammed the door behind him when he left this morning and he didn't kiss me goodbye. B, my behavior, I felt hurt and wondered what I had done wrong. I got pissed that he didn't even try to talk to me about it. Consequence, I didn't reply to his texts all day. If he can't talk to me, I don't have to talk to him. He then came home and didn't talk to me for the rest of the night. Now, this didn't actually happen, but this is a scenario you can see your clients telling you about. They interpreted an event, the antecedent, and this was the seed is the consequence of their interpretation. Cause of much spousal fighting. So how do we help clients using the power of behavior? So we're going to go into a little bit of learning theory 101. And this is where that whole positive, negative, reinforcement, punishment starts to play. We show our clients how their behavior is affected by their thoughts and feelings. We help point out that the way we respond is not the only way to react to what happened. We also help them see what really works in a scenario. If that outcome or the consequence of not changing how you respond will lead to more of what you don't want, some people have a hard time seeing how they can actually respond differently. If there is a loud boom in the room, based on my learning theory and my past, I may just jump, be startled, recover. Some people, if they've had a traumatic experience or PTSD, they may jump, startle, and not be able to recover, then beat themselves up because they couldn't recover. Again, this kind of gives the client some reassurance and validation that their reactions are valid. So there is a tool we can use with clients to help them gain insight into why they do the things they do that don't work anymore. This validates that they're not crazy, weak, or worthless for acting like they do. It helps them see that it's something they've learned. It's not who they are. So I know this is a lot of text for one slide, but this will make sense in a minute. So positive reinforcement. We added something to increase the likelihood of the behavior will happen again. So if we coach, we may say, yay, I feel great after that coaching session. We're more likely to do it again because of those good feelings. Positive punishment. You add something to decrease the likelihood someone will do the same thing again. This comes in the form of our own self-talk. You are an idiot. I cannot believe you really screwed that up. Guilt is a form of positive punishment. Anything that berates or shames is an effort to decrease the likelihood that something will happen again. That's our attempt, at least. I'll show you why that's not quite as effective as we think it is. Negative reinforcement is taking away something in order to increase the likelihood that someone will do that behavior again. Now, I learned that this is more of an American phenomenon, but I always use the seatbelt alarm that's in your car. In America, when you get in your car, you hear a ding, 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 ding. Until I clip in that seatbelt, something will be applied that wants me to increase the likelihood of the behavior. So if I clip in that seatbelt, it's negative reinforcement that I will clip in that seatbelt faster. Negative punishment is taking away something in order to decrease the likelihood that someone will do that same behavior again. You know, you're telling your son, you're scolding your child, you didn't clean your room, no Xbox for you tonight. So you're taking it away in order to decrease the likelihood they'll skip their homework again or clean their room in this one. All right, so why do we care? So when you add in for positive reinforcement and you start to orient your clients' lives and perceptions to a positive reinforcement stance, what can I add to my own behavior or my thoughts in order to increase the likelihood of me doing that again, like going to the gym? How can I reinforce myself? It adds to well-being. Negative reinforcement reduces suffering. How do I take away something that's bothering me in order that I do the behavior that I'm aiming for, that's in my values? Punishment decreases frequency of undesired behavior, but it has a catch. So positive punishment adds to suffering. Think about that. If we are telling ourselves, you are an idiot, every time we screw something up or we don't go to the gym, sure, we're trying to decrease the frequency of that undesired behavior, but it doesn't normally work, and there's fallout because it adds suffering into your experience. Negative punishment takes away something to decrease the frequency, and it reduces well-being. If you just keep taking away and taking away and taking away, like children and being grounded, you can take away the games, the phones, everything, and they're just left with nothing. It's referred to as psychological flexibility. If you add in 10 reinforcers to going to the gym, one of those will most likely be reinforcing. If you punish yourself for not going to the gym by taking away things you like ice cream, and you won't watch TV and you'll just go to bed, that narrows the number of behaviors you do. It makes us feel small and contracted. So this next slide, Homer Simpson's going to help us figure out how all this feels. So when you're doing positive reinforcement, you feel like, woohoo, okay, I did it, and here's my reward. When you're doing negative punishment, you're like, oh, I cannot believe I did that. When you're doing positive punishment, you know, it's a shock to us. When you're doing negative reinforcement, it's a relief. You're taking away something so you feel relief. On a continuum of suffering to growth, we try to stay aware of what our clients are paying attention to in order to add to well-being. If the most we can do is just get to the point of reduces well-being and steps out of the box of adds to suffering, that may be all we can do in that session. But we want to continue to move to the right because it's more positive reinforcement. This word says communities, but I think of it as more opportunities to grow. We can't stay small and contracted and expect our lives to transform. You can also have greater durability of behavior and joy the more to the right that you're going on this. So using the ABCs of behavior in the 4 quadrants, we can help our clients see, sometimes for the first time, that what happens to us does not automatically determine how we react. You'll hear clients say, well, that's just the way I am. Using these tools, you can adjust that to, that's just the way you respond. It's not a permanent sense of self, itself is context. So it gives people that power of choice back, and they now have a tool to see where their choice points are. So here's the catch. Remember we were talking about how clients get stuck? People sometimes get the idea that change doesn't work for them because it's not immediate. We're caught in doing the same behavior over and over and over again, hoping for a particular result, hopefully one that we didn't already have. So when we try and change our response, the B part, the behavior, to some trigger, the antecedent, we still have the urge to do what we've always done. That urge we refer to as extinction. Sometimes we do that very thing that we don't want to do anymore, even more often, and that's called an extinction burst. Our clients show this to us all the time. We call this the fifth quadrant extinction because there's no present day reinforcement or punishment going on. This is where mindfulness and being in the present moment can really help your clients. The behavior is simply existing based on information from the past. You know, maybe as a child it was a treat to get to watch a half-hour TV, and now we are Netflix bombing and watching everything on there. Because we're looking for that reinforcement, we're doing that behavior over and over again, but there's no present day reinforcement to be found. So what do we do with it? We wait it out and manipulate the environment so that that reinforcement doesn't occur. If a person does get reinforcement randomly and infrequently, those are some of the hardest habits to break. Gambling as an addiction is one of the hardest habits to break. To show a little bit more everyday version of that, when we have a long history of getting something we want, we'll do a behavior often, especially if you've had sufficient frequency of reinforcement. If that reinforcement stops, we keep trying to do that behavior because we've learned that's what works. So for example, what happens when you put money into a soda machine and nothing comes out? We push the button again and again, probably harder. We push the button repeatedly, faster and harder. So that's part of that extinction burst. We're pushing the Coke machine button. We're starting to talk to the machine in not so friendly tone. We push and talk and try and see if there's something stuck in the machine. And depending upon what day we're having, we might become violent towards the machine. What we didn't do was simply walk away after the first time. So setting our clients up for success. Behaviors that have a long history can take quite a while and quite a bit of effort to change. This is where environment becomes your advantage. If someone is trying to work out, don't make workout gear hard to find. Brainstorm with the client on what they can do with their environment to make that behavior reinforced and that the environment sets them up for success. This is a really common one. Your client says, I want to have a regular meditation practice. I'm sure nobody on here or listening later has any problem with a regular meditation practice. Because of course we wouldn't. So where do you want to meditate is what you want to start asking. Is that area always clean and ready? Is there a cushion or chair, or do you have to take effort to put one in place? How are the five senses affected? Are you trying to meditate in a room where everyone's getting dressed in the morning? Is it dirty, smelly, busy, or noisy? Is the time consistent? Are you having to choose a time differently every single day? Or can you pick a time at the beginning of the week so that you don't have to make the effort of another choice? And what's the inner environment like? Is there resentment, fear, or misunderstanding about the meditation practice? Or is there just a general lack of motivation or desire? So like I say often, our superpower as coaches are our questions. We don't need to know the why and how. We just need to know what to ask to help the person unhook from thinking that this is the only way they can be. There's no need to judge someone as to why they started this in the first place or how dumb they must be for continuing it. Our job is to loosen the beliefs that there's nothing that they can do. So here's a couple sample questions. What do you think is working for you when you do this behavior? In other words, this kind of gets at what reinforcer am I getting even though I say I don't want to do this anymore? Remember, the rat is always right. So if you're continuing to do something that you have verbally stated you don't want to do anymore, you're still getting something from it. So how can you set your day up so you won't be tempted to do this? Again, might be skipping meditation or not going to the gym or not going into work on time if you're always late. Always look to your environment for solutions. Whether it's people, places, or things, all of those can be changed. Maybe you have kids who don't get up on time and they make you late to work. What can you change in that environment, your people, places, or things, that would help facilitate you getting into work on time? And what triggers do you see in common when you have that thought? This is where your ABCs come into play. Because if you have the client look and think, okay, what's my trigger, the antecedent? What's my belief about what happened? And then when I think and do that, what's the consequences of that belief? So this is just a quickie overview of how it fits into the ICF core competencies. You're setting the foundation because behavior is an evidence-based model. So you are using ethical behavior-based model for coaching and upholding professional standards. You're co-creating the relationship. So your coaching presence is enhanced and you have a non-judgmental stance. You're also enhancing the trust and intimacy factor. You're communicating effectively because you're mastering active listening, powerful questioning, and direct communication. And you'll really be facilitating learning and results. Your knowledge of behavior will help you to create awareness in your client, as well as designing that action plan. So putting this into practice. Would you have any client examples? And I see we have a Brian on the call. If either of you have any client examples that you want to try, or any sticky client situations that you would need help thinking about the antecedent behavior and consequence, or whether this entire environment, we can go back to the 4 quadrants in the 5th invisible one. Is someone getting punished? Is it adding to well-being? Is it reducing suffering in their scenario? Sure. Yeah.
This is actually a client that I have, and one of my sticking points for me, I'm a major practical girl. I'm like all about like action and creating things that are very aligned, that are going to move you forward, and concrete steps. And my version of being overly spiritual or woo-woo, as it is often referred to, is, being out in nature for me. That's like really big. And that's my form of spirituality. So my client is really very woo-woo, and she's into different forms of energy and tarot card readings and the stars lining up right. And one of our challenges is that when we've created concrete action steps for her to take during the week, and then we check back in and she's sort of kind of working on it, but then we meet back up again the following week and she hasn't done anything because her tarot card reading told her not to. And so I'm very stumped with seeing somebody who wants her business to grow and move forward, but is not taking the actions because she has placed her trust in something that honestly I don't understand a lot about.
Since she's coming to you, I'm going to assume there is a motivating factor in there somewhere. You can ask her, Okay, so the trigger, the antecedent is during the day, making the choice to do, say, the tarot card reading. So her belief is this tarot card reading is going to determine whether I do this action or not. The consequence, say if the reading comes out where it says she shouldn't, is that that item is not done. So when she goes back to that original belief, getting her to examine her beliefs about what's more important, where her values. So the thing that I couldn't fit into this and not go for 4 hours is the values piece. What does she want? Does she want forward movement, or would she rather stay where she is? And if she says she wants forward movement, what reinforcement is she getting from that tarot card reading? Maybe it's like the relief, the seatbelt, the ding, ding, ding. Oh, if I do this, whoo, I feel relief. I don't have to do this scary activity. So walking her through, and that's, we call it shaping. You're slicing the behavior down to its smallest point. There is a moment in the day where she makes the decision, whether she's conscious of it or not at this point, that's your job, to do a tarot card reading. And the second decision, that based on the outcome of that reading is going to determine her actions.
Right.
So getting her to realize that she is not the one in the driver's seat, and she is choosing to let the cards make her decisions for her. Is that a consequence she wants?
Right.
That may be the consequence she wants. And you can certainly explore with her, maybe she's not ready to change. Maybe the motivation isn't there. Maybe there's a larger fear factor. Again, we talked about that positive punishment. If she's telling herself, I can't do this, I'm not smart enough, oh, cards, please help me, that may be getting in the way.
Right.
But that would be in that quadrant. It would reduce well-being.
Right.
So what action, when she has the thought, should I do a reading to do this activity? What is going to give her the greatest behavioral variability? What ways could she reinforce herself instead of turning to the cards to answer for her? What ways could she reinforce herself for doing this activity that she said, and you set up a plan for her to work on during the week?
Okay.
Does that make more sense? Because I'm only hearing one, and there probably is more. Most people have more than one.
Yes.
But just a few behaviors that get me out, that escape me from having to do the things I say I value.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I definitely see, and that's a piece that we've been working on. I mean, I realize a lot of it comes down to fear, but getting down to that pinpoint of fear, of putting herself out there and stepping into that place of owning it, whether, failure is huge in our business. And that's a really scary thing for people to face. And that is something that we're working on. And we've had to chunk it down little bits and pieces at a time to try to, really work on getting past that space of fear, and that failure is not the end of the line.
Well, and that's where I would actually take the word. I like that you use that word because we use that a lot as coaches. I actually don't use that word.
Okay.
Failure is a judgment for me of your last attempt.
Right.
If I had to stop trying because I failed, there's my air quotes, I wouldn't try and do anything new either.
Right.
But if it's just merely a consequence, and I realize in our society, consequence can sometimes have a negative connotation, but we're really using this neutrally. The consequence of the prior behavior. In that moment, in that context, that's what I did Monday. On Tuesday, I'm doing something else.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That
So
does
you
make
haven't
sense.
failed, you had a consequence.
Exactly.
Because again, we will use failure as a positive punisher. Oh, I'm such an idiot, I failed again. That decreases our likelihood of doing a behavior.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people think it's easy to kind of motivate and intimidate and rah, 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 and reminds me of the jazzercise people in the 80s. But a lot of people can find that as a punisher because they're so caught up in the outcome, they don't realize that most of that was in the antecedent and behavior, in that action. The only thing she can control is her behavior.
Right.
We really can't control all of our consequences. You know, you can't control if you got in a car tomorrow and drove to work and got in a car accident. You can control how you react to that accident. And in this case, she does have control over the consequences. Instead of seeing it as failure, sees it as, this is the outcome of my behavior.
Right.
There's no judgment. There's self-acceptance. Did that work for me? Always asking that question. Did that help?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
So keep coming back to every little decision point. Because a lot of times we go, yeah, I know. But keep her in that moment. Have her replay that moment and slow down. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you worried about? Where were you?
Right.
What kind of day did you have? That entire context of her environment. Did she just have a fight with her husband or spouse or child?
Right.
Any of those things, because relying on willpower alone will fail. You get exhausted. So how many things did she already try where she may have felt that she was already overwhelmed? And that's where we look to the environment for setting you up for success.
Okay. That works.
Okay. And I got a question in on the chat. A client that wanted to lose weight, and the client admitted she needed to but was not willing to make a change. The positive reinforcement was key. This is a great question. How long does it take to help someone figure out how long to get through the example that you're talking about now? And again, this sounds like a cop-out, but, and Brian, I'm not sure if you were on when we did the green smoothie quiz. How long something takes is up to, in this case, the client, or as we said earlier, the rat is always right. So there is something to the idea that, you know, oh, I'm old and I can't change. Well, you are chronologically advanced, and it might take some manipulation in order to change. But there still is freedom and a choice in the behaviors you do every day. Most of us just become very unconscious to it. So saying that she knew she needed to make a change to lose weight, very common. Even I say it. Again, it goes back to the how much reinforcement do you really get for losing weight? I mean, seriously, if you just lost 5 pounds and you had to run around the block 60 times to do it, that's a lot of effort for those 5 pounds. You might just go, that's not worth it to me. And that's totally fine. So how long does it take to figure out? Look to your consequences. If she comes back and she says, okay, sorry, there was a comment. Brian, you can type, I can see it. How long it takes is really up to her and what reinforcement she can find for losing weight and what reinforcement she gets for keeping the weight. A lot of times the scenario, especially because I do diabetes coaching, so when you get into food, you get into emotional eating, and you get into a lot of bottled emotions. I think of emotions as like a water, like a dam. And if you have water flowing down like a river and you've got a dam in place, and you don't give that water any place to go underneath the dam, to the side, if you don't route it out, that pressure just builds. And eventually that pressure gets released and it might be busting through that dam. So when you're trying to change behavior, you always want to give that behavior, that energy, an outlet. So if you can't eat, you can't eat potato chips. Oh my God, I would cry. Don't even tell me that. What can I do? What can I put in place of it? Because when I desire comfort, I want comfort. And my reinforcement history says potato chip eating brings me comfort. It also brings me an extra 10 pounds. So if I can no longer have that option of eating potato chips is blocked to my emotions, where am I going to route it? Am I going to find reinforcement? And again, in the beginning, finding that reinforcement is going to take trial and error. And that's where curiosity in coaching comes in, where you get to be really curious and come up with, 20 other behaviors. Now the client may say, I can't think of 4. How am I going to come up with 20? But just that anything type of attitude, you will come up with a larger repertoire of behaviors than you had at the beginning. So being willing to make a change or having the willpower to make a change, it comes into play, but you can't have someone just stop a behavior without a replacement for that behavior, an outlet. Just like people with anxiety. There's a reason they tell them to exercise. It works the physical body and gets rid of some of the physiological symptoms of anxiety. But mentally, if you're still churning, in the beginning, to kind of get you off that anxiety hamster wheel, it's what's an alternative behavior you can do to take the place of your mind churning. So Brian, does that help answer your question? We want to look for, okay, good. Yeah, you want to look for alternate behaviors. You want to look for where your environment sets you up to fail. Like for example, me, potato chips, we have an open pantry. If there's a bag sitting there that I can just grab at my height, I need a different environmental variable, i.e. put the potato chips on the top shelf. Anything that takes more effort is going to help. So if I don't see any more. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys coming, and if you're viewing this at home, really, I'm not kidding. I could talk about this all day long. Do you know how hard it was to get it down to even just 1 hour? I can talk to you and do private. I'm not building a business of doing this. This is simply because it works. It's what really helps. So really, there is no sales pitch. I'm not selling you the big coaching package. Sorry. But yes, this is how you can get in touch with me if you do want to do more. And if you want a 201 course, I can certainly come up with that.
That is awesome.
Thank you. Oh, the question was, do you have any other resources that you would recommend new coaches read? Oh, wow. The list is endless. I don't have the book here. There's a book. It's sort of easy to read if you don't have any background. The ABCs of Human Behavior. I'll have to find out the bookshelf back there. I would not recommend actually reading Skinner's books because it will make your brain bleed. But there are some websites. There's actually some Facebook pages, Behavior Babe. That is a great site for explaining out. You're going to see a lot of behavior talk around autism because that's where a lot of applied behavior analysis is used nowadays. But because I've done it for years, the other place is dog training. And so if it doesn't offend you, because it shouldn't, it's all the same science. Reaching the Animal Mind by Karen Pryor. While it talks about an animal mind, it's going to go into the science of that learning theory and give you a little bit more idea of how all of this works. And it also has a ton of human examples. There's a book, What Shamu Taught Me About Marriage. It's a couple years old, so you should be able to find it in a used bookstore. But it talks about using the science of behavior in one animal trainer's own personal life. So you get a lot of personal anecdotes. What else could you possibly read? There is just a slew, and depending upon how much behavior background or if you need to start with the basics, I can always send some more information out. But I would at least start with those to kind of get it going. The ABCs of Human Behavior is gonna obviously reiterate kind of what we went through here. But I'll put together some more resources on that. So, well, thank both of you. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Leann. I loved it.
Okay, good. Thank you, Shelley. And thank you, Brian, for coming. I really, really appreciate it. I will be uploading this later this week. You're free to share. There's nothing particular. There's nothing proprietary. So I just want coaches to feel empowered and enthusiastic and have better tools to really dig in and help their clients.